We've seen something that's been great about CD Baby. We've seen all these niche artists that previously couldn't get any sort of audience, gain an audience. And that kind of speaks to what you talk about in your book, Tribes, these people that are able to find a group of people that were normally left outside of the mainstream, but they're able to lead them and gain a following.
Right. So, leading doesn't always mean taking over the Wisconsin State House. Keller Williams, who is one of my favorite independent musicians, leads a group of people on a rolling party as it travels around the country. And you show up at a Keller concert and you'll recognize people who you've seen from other concerts. The vibe is similar. This is your family. These are people you would miss if you didn't get to see them again. And they couldn't go to this party if Keller wasn't there. And so his role, and he understands this, his role is to keep the tribe together and moving forward. And he does this by going in a direction, and people who want to follow him, follow him.
I know that a lot of the artists that we work with every day they see that happening. And like I said, we've had a lot of success stories here at CD Baby of people who have naturally found those roles. But there seems to be a growing number of people that are kind of frustrated and by the fact that they now have to kind of consider marketing a part of their musical efforts and also kind of building grassroots tribes, if you will. And that is now taking over part of the music making aspect of being a musician. What do you think about people who are struggling with that?
I would really like to encourage them to remember about the tyranny of being picked. And the old model was based on the second grade notion of raising your hand and waiting for someone in power to pick you. And the problem with that is if you get picked, it's great. If you're on Oprah, it's great. If Clive Davis picks you, it's great. But almost no one gets picked. And I think that we should think twice before we wish to go back to the days of needing to get picked. And the alternative is pick yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you pick yourself, then what you have to understand is that comes with a lot of responsibility. And part of that responsibility is figuring out how to bring your message to the world.
And I think that's where a lot of artists kind of get frustrated right at that point where you said, figure out how you're going to take your message to the world. How do you go about locating your tribe? I mean, because, there's some people that I've seen that just seem to be a natural at it, and other people that are great musicians and get frustrated with the idea that, okay, my music being good isn't good enough anymore. What's the first step they need to take in order to just look around and figure out who their tribe is?
Well, let's talk about what it means to be a great musician. Does that mean playing all the notes in the right order? Or does it mean creating a performance that makes someone cry or touches them in some way? Or does it mean putting music into the world that spreads because people can't help but spread it? I think that the first category is the one we need to say not so much anymore. That just because you please a critic or just because you are better than that guy who's already famous does not mean you are a great musician. I think what it means to be a great musician is that there are people in the world who, once they hear your work, can't get it out of their head. They need more of it, and they need to share it. So your job is not to figure out how to fit in enough to get Pitchfork to pick you or to fit in enough to get that crowd at South by Southwest to pick you. I think the way you become a great musician is you find 10 people who, when they're exposed to your work, need more of it, and who bring their friends. And then you have 20 people, and then you have 50 people, and that's how you grow. And if we look at, the woman who wrote Harry Potter or the guy who wrote The Tipping Point, these are authors who don't start with huge numbers of people. Now, what happens is you start with a small number of people, and those small number of people bring you other people. And that idea is the key. I mean, J.K. Rowling was rejected and rejected and rejected because the gatekeepers thought she wasn't a great writer. But what happened was enough independent bookstores and enough 12-year-olds thought she was a great writer, that the word spread. J.K. Rowling doesn't have to go out every single day and harass people. She created great work that spread.
So the key is to just focus on a small group and make sure that those people are just completely satisfied and just blown away by what you're doing, that they just want to keep telling other people.
Right. And if they're not, then you got to change one of two things, either the group or your work. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That there are groups of people that I've spoken to over the years as a speaker who don't get me. So I could change who I am, or I could go find a new group. And lucky for me, the group that I really want to appeal to is pretty big. But if they weren't, I would probably still be doing the same work. I just wouldn't be popular, and people wouldn't call my work great because it wasn't resonating with people.
I know there's a lot of talk about the 1,000 true fans, and a lot of times when it relates to a tribe, putting together a tribe. What exactly is the concept of having 1,000 true fans?
So Kevin Kelly coined the term, and it's brilliant. And the math goes like this. If you don't have a manager, an agent, a recording studio, hangers-on, and the rest of the Eddie Murphy crowd around you, how many people actually do you need to be a professional? How many people need to be out there who will send you $50 a year? Well, it's like 1,000. If there are 1,000 people who will pay $50 for 2 CDs or $50 for a couple concert tickets, you're making $50K. That's not rich money, but it's enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's enough to get you started. And if you get to 10,000, now you're making $500,000 a year. That's a lot. Well, in every single corner of the music industry, 10,000 is considered a failure. And so the point here is that maybe you need to think not about Billboard and not about Casey Kasem, but maybe you need to think about whether there are 10,000 people who care enough to send you $50 a year when you send them an email saying the new thing is ready.
How do you keep that group of people that engaged with you in this day and age where there's just a glut of bands, a glut of music, and just everybody grabbing their attention? What kind of things can an artist do to keep people thinking, wanting to participate on that ongoing basis?
Well, a key part of it is you need more than 10,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
You need 100,000 semi-true fans before you're going to have 10,000 true fans, right? And this is where the promiscuity comes in. That if, how much should Arcade Fire have charged the listeners on the Grammys to hear them play, right? They charge nothing. Mm-hmm. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Isn't that piracy, right? Well, in fact, they would have gladly paid to be heard by that group of people, because that promiscuous behavior of spreading your idea for no money makes it more likely, if the door is clearly marked, that the true fans will go through that door. So, there's all sorts of ways that once you have a true fan, you can figure out a codependent relationship where they benefit and you benefit. But first, you got to have true fans.
What do you see artists doing that you would say is the wrong thing to do when trying to reach out to make those connections like you're talking about that makes them from being a decent artist to being a great artist? I know a lot of people will jump in trying to connect with an audience and just go about it all the wrong ways. What are some of those ways that are just the wrong ways?
Well, I would say the biggest thing is compromising for the masses. That everyone will never listen to what you make, ever. So stop trying. And instead of pleasing 1 million, figure out how to delight 1,000 and get back to your roots of what made you become a musician in the first place, right? That if you can't figure out how pleasing yourself also pleases your tribe, then you're never going to be happy as a musician. So you better start by overwhelmingly delighting yourself with the work you make, not because it fits in and not because people don't criticize it, but in fact seeking to be criticized by people who don't get the joke, because that's the goal. Not to be a Borscht Belt comedian, but to be the edgy one that people will travel across the country to listen to. Jerry Seinfeld is the exception. He is not the rule. The rule, the model that really works, is to be on the edge, not in the center. And I guess the second thing I would say is that patience is key. That when we talk to people who weren't the overnight one-hit wonders, but who are really professional musicians, they're patient at it. That these people, I just heard this jazz musician the other night, and she's been at it for 30 years, and now her tribe is showing up. That sucks, but that's the deal.